There are some languages that you learn that just don't have enough stuff, enough films, TV, music, all of those things that you can dig into and really take in the culture. Spanish, on the other hand, is not one of those languages. You almost have the opposite problem where there's a bit of overwhelm because there's too much stuff to choose from. So in this video, I want to give you 9 of my favourite Spanish films, all different genres, all different countries and places and stories and styles, to give you something to get started with and avoid the overwhelm. Before we get started, if you do want to use film and TV in your language learning, then Watch and Learn is for you. In this short mini course, you're going to learn how to combine film and TV and your languages and actually have it be useful, going beyond this like very passive thing that you feel like, I'm just going to watch and it will wash over me and I'll be fluent. Talking about how and when to use subtitles and figuring out a process that you can use that works across the board, any language, any level, any film or TV content. I will pop the link to Watch and Learn in the description of this episode, so have a look if you're curious, and yeah, let's get into it. So my first recommendation is Bad Education, or La Mala Educación. Now, I could honestly just do a list of Almodovar films because there's so many, and not only is there so many, there's so many good ones. So maybe that's its own thing that maybe we'll do one day. So this is kind of representative of all of that. If you're learning Spanish, this is the default. This is the go-to. Almodovar is to Spanish what Amélie is to French. You know what I mean? That you've probably seen one of them already. Maybe even La Mala Educación. But this one in particular, for me, I'm recommending because it was the first Almodovar film that I saw. I wrote about it for my A-levels, so I've watched it many times over and over, like analysed it, pulled it all apart to get all of that stuff that you need to write about in that kind of essay of like, they used this colour to represent this and symbolise that. So yeah, I know it very well and it always kind of touches me. The story is deep and unusual and moving and complex and just so good. So if you're looking for an entry point, maybe you've heard of Pedro Almodovar and you've heard how essential that is, but you're not really sure where to start, this is a great start point. He is known for the recurring kind of aesthetic, very colourful, very bold characters, very strong characters as well. And these themes that recur of like gender and sexuality and all of this stuff, Bad Education gives you a broad spectrum of all of those themes, all of those style and aesthetic choices. So soon enough, you'll be able to identify an Almodovar when you see one. The second recommendation is a very different film, and that is Rec. So if Almodovar is like drama with style, Rec is pure handheld horror. Think Paranormal Activity, Blair Witch, and then there's like a side order of zombies. That's what Rec is. It's quite a short film, just 78 minutes long, but that makes it a really nice break from films that just seem to be getting longer and longer nowadays. And you can tell a foreign film is successful when there's an American remake of it in Hollywood, and yes, I'm pretty sure this has the remake. So skip the remake, go back to the original, get a bit of Spanish practice in as well. Number 3 is Rotting in the Sun. Now when you start watching this film, it's really easy to think, okay, I know exactly what this film is, I know where it's going, I know how I feel about these characters, and then there is this major plot twist way earlier than you would ever expect a plot twist. So it really just takes you and goes, boop, pulled the rug from under you, not what you're expecting at all. I really don't want to say too much more than that because the surprise is well worth it. Even knowing that there's a surprise coming, I've probably said too much. So without saying too much more and giving too much away, I will say that it is a dark comedy with some really twisted, interesting characters. Language lessons. So the next recommendation, fair enough, is mostly in English, half Spanish. It's the mix of the two languages. But the reason I'm recommending this one is that it has this great quality of very authentically representing what it's like to learn a language in modern times. The story begins with Adam's partner buying him a package of Spanish lessons with Cariño, and that then becomes this essential outlet for Adam as his life takes a bit of a turn. And you follow all of this through webcam, very of its time. I think it was released in 2021, so pure like post-COVID era movie. Just really, really good. Underrated film. Lovely plot, lovely story, really engaging characters. Highly, highly recommend. Oh yeah, and you might cry a little bit because I did, but that's okay. Next up is Roma. You've probably heard of this one because it won lots of awards when it came out in 2018, and rightfully so. The choice to make it black and white instantly makes it feel like a classic, and that might come across in some other films as a bit of a trope, a bit like, oh, they've just done it black and white to make me think this is good. But Roma actually is good, and it does have real heart, and the story, you just follow the flow of the story, just let the film wash over you. The story gives you a bit of an insight into class in 1970s Mexico, and you also get to hear a bit of Mixtec as well, which is an indigenous language from Mexico, which is really cool. So cool to see that kind of representation on film. The Orphanage. So if you enjoyed Rec, and you're like, yeah, I've seen that one, give me another horror film, you'll love The Orphanage. This is a different kind of horror, so less handheld, POV, zombie, and more creepy kid. If you like creepy kid horror, you'll love The Orphanage. Laura returns to where she grew up, an orphanage, with plans to make it home for disabled children. Now she's there with her son Simon, who makes friends with someone who may or may not exist, may or may not live in the orphanage, and yeah, we'll leave it at that. Next recommendation for you is Maria, Full of Grace. Now this is another one for me that's very personal, goes back a long way. I remember buying this in Blockbuster on DVD. That's how long ago. And I bought it purely as like, oh, it's a Spanish film, it's a decent price, I can practice my Spanish. And the story and the place and everything about it is just wonderful. It really gives you an insight into the other side of something that is very tropey, that is, in my opinion, often overtold in modern TV. So think about Netflix, where you have like Narcos and all the El Chapo stuff that's just like all about the drug trade in Latin America. It just kind of, in my opinion, glorifies it a little bit, which isn't really the way to go. Maria, Full of Grace shows a different side to that very real and should be talked about side of life for many people in that region. And it does it so gracefully, really. It's a film full of grace, we should say. It does it so gracefully. It really just lets you see inside something that you otherwise wouldn't know much about. So the film follows the story of Maria, who lives in Colombia, doesn't have many options, so ends up becoming a drug mule and flying to the US. Again, I'm not going to tell you the whole story, I'm just going to leave things there to give you an idea of what it's about, but one that is definitely worth a watch. Next up, The Heiress. Now this may be a film that you haven't heard of, because I hadn't heard of it until I spotted it one day on Mubi, and I spotted it because I was looking for films from Paraguay. There's not many. It's not exactly like a big film industry place, you know. You've got Spain and you've got Mexico, to a certain extent, maybe Colombia next after that in terms of film and TV production. Paraguay, however, like, doesn't really get that same representation. So I really wanted to include it on the list here, and it's interesting because it looks at a sort of kind of a love story, but also like prison life as well. And again, something that gets very easily reduced to like sort of schlocky documentaries of like, look at this, the world's toughest prison, wow. But it's actually a woman's prison in this case, in this film, and it looks at wealth and changes in wealth and like generational wealth and all of these things, these really interesting topics and aspects that, again, it's like Maria, Full of Grace. You're sort of observing something that you wouldn't otherwise get to observe. I really loved the very believable characters in this and the world building of the film. If there was one critique, and this is a very personal one, it would be that there wasn't enough Guarani in the film. But I understand why. When you watch it, you'll see why it's not there. It's not part of this story. And my final recommendation is Lopez Street. So again, this is another film that I discovered on Mubi. It is one that is very different to everything else on this list. It's not like a drama or a horror or something with like, you know, very linear story. Instead, it's more of a documentary, just without the sort of sit down in a chair interview style documentary. So it follows a street, Lopez Street, waking up in the morning, the shops gradually opening, the people coming and going, the traffic coming and going, and then closing down. It just follows that trajectory of a day in the life of a street. It's insightful, but it's very slow and meandering, of course, but that's kind of the point, right? Nothing much really happens, but that's it. That is the point of the film. The way that Lopez Street just drifts between following these moments of different vendors and different passers-by of the street really gives this very non-intrusive fly-on-the-wall feel, which can be quite rare in documentaries. Sometimes you do feel a bit like you're forced into a scene. And there we go. I hope there's something new here for you, some recommendations that can just get you going with Spanish. Like I say, it can feel really overwhelming sometimes trying to pick something to watch. I've picked these films because they're all quite different, so it's going to give you something new, hopefully, to find and to discover that is a genre and a style that you're interested in. If you then want to take that further, if you want to combine watching that film or rewatching segments of that film with your language learning and actually learn more Spanish through film and through TV, Watch and Learn is the way to go. And the reason Watch and Learn exists is because I just felt that it seems like there's either you watch stuff and that's very passive, or you are doing active learning, and that is not watching film, right? But why can't we combine the two? So Watch and Learn is about how to combine an active learning process into the film and TV that you watch, as and when. Not all the time. You don't have to do this all the time. You can do this like on demand when you want it, when you need it, but you don't need to feel obliged to do it all of the time. If you want to learn more, the link to Watch and Learn is in the description of this episode, and I look forward to welcoming you into Watch and Learn. I will see you very soon. Do all of the YouTube things: like, subscribe, follow, comment, share, tell a friend, make a t-shirt, I don't know, all of that stuff, and I will see you very soon. Thank you. Bye.